Hey everybody, today I'm going to be making a different, weirder type of video. Today we're going to be discussing a specific character from Monster Hunter, one who is almost universally disliked within the community and series, and is known for their annoying habits, their way of talking, and their general ineptitude within the world of Monster Hunter. I'm of course talking about the Handler from Monster Hunter World. The Handler plays a role similar to many other characters within the series, such as the Guild Marm from Monster Hunter 4 or the Guild or Moga Sweetheart from Monster Hunter Tri, in that she is your main source of receiving quests and learning about the hunts you're about to take part in. The biggest difference, however, lies in how actively relevant and prominent the Handler is within the story of Monster Hunter World, a more story-centric game in the series, and the first to have characters with voiced lines actively showing off their personalities. While characters like the Guild Marm or Sweetheart are generally looked back upon fondly, you will almost certainly find a large level of vitriolic hate directed towards the Handler specifically, and I believe there's many valid factors for why that is. I too have openly expressed my dislike for the character overall. I know my partner also isn't a big fan of hers, and you don't have to look far to find many others who feel the same. Today I want to look into why this is, what it is about the character that makes her so dislikable to the majority of the community, and whether or not many of these points hold actual validity or simply are curtains and excuses used to hide a more insidious reason for not liking her. This video isn't a call out on anyone specifically or generally, but rather just a means of looking at what caused something like this to happen. If you feel personally called out or attacked by this video, please remember that I don't know you and can't speak about your reasoning specifically. You know you go about your day, whatever. This is simply my own observations and conclusions based on what I've seen online with very little statistical backing. If you enjoy these videos, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing. They take a while to make and every little bit of support helps. With that out of the way, I'm Super Rad, and this is Monster Hunter World, the uncomfortable hatred for the Handler. I'd like to preface this video by saying that it's perfectly fine to not like this character. I don't particularly like the Handler either, but upon examining why, a few questions came up as to what the causes were and why. If you Google the Handler online, you will find countless threads, mostly on Reddit, of individuals expressing their disdain for the character, her attitude, her physical appearance, and many other qualities. Some threads question why the Handler is hated so much, while others are simply there to complain. My original personal reasoning for not liking the character centered mostly around her voice actor Eden Regal, a renowned voice actor in the industry who, on top of voicing the Handler, voiced other characters like Devola and Popola from the Nier series, Hifumi Togo from Persona 5 Royal, and most recently Mei from Guilty Gear Strive. It's what I would call a bubblegum or candy voice, overly sweet and unfortunately grating to my ears. Throw that in with certain mannerisms of the Handler, such as saying pard instead of partner in certain situations, and you can easily be worn down or sickened, similar to eating a birthday cake that's a bit too sweet. Adding that to the character being around all the time, constantly interacting with the character, it's understandable why this could be considered exhausting and why some players may prefer to play in a different game language with English subtitles. But that's simply a dislike of the character for a small reason that can be remedied via changing the in-game language. There's no personal reason for me to hate the individual, to become angry when I see her in cutscenes, to rant about her on online forums and detest her so much that you can even see people complain about the character under fan art, mock her physical appearance, and to value the contributions the character makes within the albeit bare-bones storyline of Monster Hunter World. I recently asked on Twitter for individuals that openly disliked the character to rate the level of their disdain and explain why, and I noticed a few things. One was that some of the posts were almost word for word not only the exact same reasons, but also written the exact same way. We, who's we, or some variation of this statement is one we would see very often, and is an argument about the contributions of the Handler and a perceived notion that she didn't contribute at all within the storyline, unlike the hunter who is actually killing or capturing these monsters. While I believe there were some fairly valid reasons for holding some form of dislike towards the character, generally getting someone to expand on their initial comments would lead to a much less structurally sound argument for disliking the character so vehemently. So let's take a look at some of those now, see which hold a solid foundation and which come off as some sort of either misremembering or bandwagoning or potentially Let me start by saying that within the world of Monster Hunter, you rarely, if ever, see death outside of the monsters themselves. It's such a well understood concept that the characters are rarely in any real danger that to see individuals killed within the Monster Hunter movie by Paul W.S. Anderson had the community in a collective uproar. It's just not something that happens in these games that are framed as fairly silly, lighthearted adventures with some major environmental consequences sprinkled in. Fatalis' inclusion in World specifically is potentially the most real danger we've seen a hunter put through since Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate when one of the aces was injured by Gore Magala. So why then are there so many people that take issue with the reckless nature of the handler specifically? Constant tweets touched on the need of the handler to be saved constantly, but upon rewatching the cutscenes through the gallery feature in Monster Hunter World, those events seem to be few and far between, and the events that did take place were rarely solely the handler's fault. When looking into this, I saw three major situations in which the handler had to actively be rescued, those being her interaction with the Jagras and Great Jagra at the start of the game, an Odogaron, and a Devil Joe. I saw some mention the character's interaction with Puke Puke as well, but nothing really happened in that cutscene at all. It didn't really make any sense to delve into it. I think it's important to note that Monster Hunter World is a game about exploration in a new world environment. Many people pointed out that the characters arriving to the new worlds are supposed to be experts in some way, but it's clear that both the handler and the hunter you are playing are as novices when it comes to interacting with this new location. In fact, everyone that arrives, including Aiden and his handler, are very clearly green, and this is meant to set up both your and others' NPCs' growth as they explore in the game. The handler is no different in this. In fact, she is one of the characters with the most character growth, backstory, and development by the end of Iceborne. Consider that a hunter and a handler are a team. It is expected that a handler will go out with their hunter to perform research, to be their eyes and ears in a way and provide advice. Some people ask why the handler would go out like this, defenseless, but I ask why any handler would ever do this if they're always in some form of danger, and I think the answer is pretty obvious. What the handler lacks in combat skills, they make up for in research ability, and it is the job of their partners, the hunters, to protect them while doing this. Hunters don't just hunt, they actively gather, perform errands for scholars, and perform deliveries. It makes sense and seems fairly obvious that the hunter is expected to keep their handler safe in a supportive, cohesive relationship. It would make sense that similar situations that happen with the handler in our party may happen between characters like the serious handler and the excitable A-lister, although off-screen. It isn't illogical for the handler to be as reckless as she is because she knows she has the protection of her hunter, and I believe regardless that this recklessness is overplayed. I think the two most valid examples of the handler being reckless are the Great Jagras and the Odogaron encounters. In the first, the handler and hunter have just been stranded in the ancient forest. The handler runs ahead slightly to examine some tracks and is attacked by a Great Jagras, only to be saved not by the hunter but by the field team leader, because the hunter currently doesn't have a weapon at this point in the game. Both the hunter and handler are on equal footing at this point in the game, and either one of them or both of them would have found themselves in a situation of needing to be saved had they examined those tracks. Whether the handler was alone or not wasn't a factor here, and not recklessness on her part, but rather doing all she could in an emergency situation. There's even a point within this part of the game where she explains that the hunter shouldn't pick a fight if they don't have a weapon when being attacked by a pack of Jagras. If anything, she comes off as the more responsible of the two in this situation. The other major encounter with the Odogaron is one of actual recklessness, in which the handler rushes off ahead within the Rotten Vale without looking for any tracks and gets attacked by said monster and has to be saved by the tracker. Most people will explain this reckless nature of the character, which again has only been done once or twice by this point in the game, as something that the handler does without remorse. However, upon watching the cutscene, we see that the handler is not only in deep worry of what could potentially happen to the tracker, but actually breaks down and cries upon the tracker's return, not only showing remorse, but growth of a bond between the two characters. There's one other major situation in which the handler gets put into extreme danger with a Devil Joe, and most people will usually point to this one specifically as one of their examples for her recklessness. The issue with this is that the handler is already out in the field by the time a lockdown is placed due to the Devil Joe and has no idea of what danger she's in. It's not through her own lack of caring that gets her in danger, but just an unfortunate circumstance of events. I think these three major events are what frame this helpless, reckless theme for the handler in people's minds, but I also feel like they come from a fundamental misunderstanding or misremembering of the events as they took place. They also get enforced by minor events throughout the game in which the handler and hunter are side by side, with the hunter preparing to fight while first making sure the handler has gotten away safely. It's not that the handler is reckless, but just that she is energetic and eager to perform her job, a job many other people within the game have as well, and one that puts them in just as much danger whether they are hunters or not. To say the handler shouldn't be there would be to say that no researcher should be able to go out into the field and do their duty. Danger is a part of the job, and it's the responsibility of the hunter to protect them in these situations. This helps lead into the second major point. Another major argument that ties into the handler's recklessness is her perceived uselessness within the storyline of Monster Hunter World. A common complaint from many people that interacted with my tweet or posted about the handler online was that she didn't do anything to contribute to the success of the research commission, but took all of the praise and credit. You will constantly see people parrot the same general phrase, "We did it? Who's we? I'm the one who did the hunt. You did nothing," or some variation of that same sentiment. I think we've set up an understanding that the hunter and the handler are a team. They both bring something to the table in the world of Monster Hunter. While the handler doesn't actively combat monsters, she still offers advice, cooks for the hunter when on the field, performs research, and is one of the key players in theorizing and understanding the cause and point of the Elder Crossing and Xeno'jiiva. She's essentially the Fuka Rise or Futaba from the Persona series that oversees fights and offers useful information based on her understanding of the environment or monsters. It always comes off as ungrateful and seemingly blind to her actions when people act like they were the sole key point to victory, simply because they performed one aspect of all the mystery solving, research, and exploration within a hunt. A team is more than just the hunters specifically, so it makes sense that the team would be referred to as we. Hell, the only time I ever really even saw her talk like this was during the final fight against Xeno'jiiva, and it was more of an anime final battle style morale boost shout from the sidelines, something you might see in Dragon Ball or something similar. It was a very shonen style finale. You, as the hunter, wouldn't even be at Xeno'jiiva if not for the handler's help. So yes, we did it. It was a team. She's even active in the field from time to time. She was the one who helped distract Digiros when landing in the Rotten Vale, and she also got the scholars to safety when attacked by a Baroth. She's not as helpless as some people seem to believe and actively contributes to the adventure and exploration as a whole. There's a point where the Admiral believes that the Nergigante was the sole issue that was causing the problems for the Elder Dragons, and the handler in this case and in multiple others was the one to reason out and theorize that this wasn't the main contributing factor. She also was able to come to the same conclusions as the tracker about the Rotten Vale being a graveyard for monsters that tied in directly to the New World's ecosystem. People seem to believe that she's a bad character because of her quirks, when time and time again she's shown to be both resourceful and knowledgeable. There seems to be a weird mentality where players don't see as much value in the research side they do as the hunting. If you aren't actively killing a monster, you haven't really done anything at all within their eyes, and that simply isn't the case whether it be in the real world or the world of Monster Hunter. There are always many contributing roles to success, and while some aren't as visible as others, they are equally, if not more so, important. This also leads to a very weird perception that the handler hasn't earned the player's friendship and is overly friendly when they are two characters who spend the most time together, camp together, and actively save the lives of one another. Again, the handler even cooks for you, making it clear that there would definitely be some sort of bond between the two of you. And this idea that she takes the credit of the player seems to tie into the praise in which she receives, with some finding said praise unjustified. I even asked someone to elaborate on this topic since it was clear that the handler did contribute in some way, only to be told that even if the handler did contribute, anyone could have done what the handler had done, meaning that the praise was unwarranted. And that's such an odd statement to me. If the argument is whether or not the handler did anything to deserve praise, you can see now that she was clearly active in the Research Commission's efforts to find out the reason for the Elder Crossing and dealing with Xeno'jiiva. If someone else could have done what the handler did, why didn't they? And even if they could have, the fact that the handler was the one to perform said actions is worthy of praise in itself. One set of gripes I saw for disliking the handler some I could definitely get behind, tie into her mechanical design structure throughout Monster Hunter World. While the handler has a large impact on the story and setting as a whole, she mechanically functions as an expositioned fairy within the actual gameplay, often acting as a mouthpiece to inform the player about their surrounding environments in a way that can sometimes be intrusive. Most people will liken this to Navi, though it really isn't as bad. Aside from some missions where the player has to follow along with the handler, her information that she provides rarely prevents the player from continuing onward, like how Navi would stop you dead in your tracks to tell you an enemy's weakness. That being said, with how often she talks to you and with complaints of her voice actor and grating personality, it is understandable why this would begin to wear on players and leave a bad taste in their mouth in regards to the handler. One thing I couldn't get behind, however, was the idea that the handler takes away the agency of the player as their hunter. To put this in perspective, every Monster Hunter game has always had a hunter that was talked to instead of allowing them to talk themselves. Not simply a silent protagonist, but a protagonist that would be asked questions only to be told what their answer was. This is a main design point of story progression within these games. You have key quests you need to complete, but all of the actual decision making and storyline is handled by the various NPCs around you. That's why it's so weird to me to see people complain about how the handler talks for the player or takes their agency away from them, since every NPC in every Monster Hunter game has always done this exact same thing. That being said, it is a valid criticism to be annoyed that the handler is constantly prodding and reminding you to go finish your storyline assignments whenever you come back to town because you instead decided to focus on some side content. But realistically, all NPCs are annoying in this regard. We just see more of the handler overall. Each Monster Hunter game has a quest handler and guild maidens. Around the 3rd generation is when your main quest handler began being solely female, with the Moga Sweetheart, the Guild Marm, and then the handler, with the handler being the first to be so outspoken and take such a large active role within the storyline. Generally, the quest givers stay back and have the sole job of providing you quests, but in Monster Hunter World, the developers seem to want to explore a more active role for this character type, and this seems to be to the disdain of many people for multiple reasons. However, I believe that a large portion of these reasons are based on how visible the handler is within the story, as a lot of them could be said for any other quest giver in the series. I saw many claim that she has no character development, but in such a bare bones storyline, looking into it, we can see she actually has the most character development within the entirety of Monster Hunter World. Less so in the base game, sure, and then a large storyline involving her grandfather in the Iceborne expansion. Let's take a look at the main personality of the handler. She's eager, eccentric, potentially reckless, and has this quirk about her fondness for food, something I saw many people constantly belittling her for. I saw many people upset that they gave the character a personality centered around enjoying to eat because it came off as silly, but that doesn't make a lot of sense to me because the quest givers have always had these weird quirks. Take the Guildmarm, for example. Not only does she call you Doodle all the time, similar to being called Pard by the handler, but her main quirks include making plushies of various monsters and also wanting to get railed by a Brachydios. So if we're going to talk about silly personalities in Monster Hunter, it's clear Guildmarm is a much sillier character type than the handler. So why is the Guildmarm generally looked back upon positively and the handler with disdain? Well, the softball reason is simply that the handler is more apparent within the storyline. She's a character that appears actively within all of the cutscenes and is in a game within the series to finally have voice acting and more solidified personalities. Quirks that we have seen via text from background characters are now fully voiced personalities at the forefront of the game's storyline, so players are more actively aware of them and seeing them more often, leading to more disdain for these types of quirks. I even saw one individual mention that the food trope specifically was a trigger for their own experiences with eating disorders, so there's definitely valid reasons for not being comfortable with that quirk specifically, but I think it's odd to dislike the character for having quirks as a whole. Monster Hunter is a silly setting with serious points thrown in. It's a game where a bunch of superhuman individuals fight large monsters with bipedal warrior cats and feline chefs and dressed up pigs who you rub for good luck, even though it doesn't actually work. These types of quirks have always fit within the series, so it seems weird to dislike the handler specifically for having them, and you have to start asking yourself if there's something more at play here. If a lot of the handler's tropes existed within other characters, is it simply that they are at the forefront now that makes them so detestable to people? Or is it simply that they are the quirks of an individual that many people do not deem conventionally attractive? The quirks of a powerful, energetic personality that some people would excuse on a character like the Guildmarm or the Mogus Sweetheart, but not on the Handler. Now, before you head to the comments to defend yourself over that last bit, hear me out. I'm not accusing anyone of being openly resentful of the Handler simply due to her physical appearance. I'm not accusing individuals of being openly misogynistic, but there is an uncomfortable air surrounding a lot of the criticisms with the Handler that I feel needs to be addressed, whether you think it holds validity or not. It should come as no surprise to you that many people that play these games have an affinity for the receptionists. The guild receptionist from Generation 1, Shirley from Gen 2, Aisha the Mogus Sweetheart from Gen 3, Guildmarm from Gen 4, and so on. All of these characters have one major factor about them in common, and that is the aspect of being conventionally attractive. This is a weird topic to go over. I find it makes a lot of people uncomfortable when you bring up that their motivations for disliking a character might be heightened due to the character being less attractive in your eyes. That a character's worth may be tied into their attractiveness, but it's an unfortunate aspect that we see within media and our various cultures time and time again, and it's worth looking over for the sake of covering all of our bases. It may be uncomfortable to hear this, but there is a good chance that there is some level of misogyny at play here. What is this based on exactly? A quick Google search will show you that many individuals found the Handler specifically to be a fairly unattractive character overall in terms of beauty, while some, including those that I polled, called this an uncanny valley effect that was present in all NPCs. The Handler specifically received the most backlash over her physical appearance online. Videos called "We Know Why the Handler is Ugly," posts making fun of her and claiming Capcom is fixing her ugliness. People openly asking if you would sleep with her, comparing her looks to the more conventionally attractive, serious Handler. Even many mods to make the Handler more attractive, attempting to fix her, and other mods openly mocking the idea that she is overweight with fat-phobic mods designed around making her obese. There has never been this much backlash over the appearance of a character in the Monster Hunter series, and it would be disingenuous to say that this doesn't have some sort of effect in how people perceive the Handler overall, or how they handle her quirks and personality. Not only do you have a high-energy woman at the forefront of the game you're playing, but she isn't as conventionally attractive as what is usually presented within mainstream media. This is something we see time and time again within our media. We even have this phenomenon of people being upset that developers are making female characters more realistic, claiming that Western game developers specifically are creating ugly women, leading to certain percentages of the player base disliking these games or the characters within them. This can correlate with what we see in Monster Hunter World. Some weird dudes don't think the Handler is waifu material, so they complain about her somewhere online and the idea gets popularized. I'm not saying that this is a factor into everyone's perception of the character, but I do think it is a large factor that affects many, gamers from time to time, and definitely has some effect on some of them. I think that there is a fundamental misunderstanding of the Handler that is a formulation of what people have read about her online. I think most people going into Monster Hunter for the first time wouldn't have as much of an issue with her, but this can start to slowly change over time as you read complaints about her online from individuals that absolutely despised her. I think I'm even guilty of that. I saw one individual in my question thread even admit to this type of bandwagoning. Realistically, I think that the character is mechanically annoying, and this ties into a level of dislike for her overall that can sometimes overshadow her contributions within the series. This is the fault of the designers and developers and not the personality of the character herself though. I believe that if you go back and watch the cutscenes involving her, you'll see that she really wasn't that bad, and while you may still dislike her, it won't be to the level that you usually see online, and you may even come to appreciate her as I have. Overall, this level of hate seems to be, in my opinion, a form of bandwagoning with a special little sprinkle of misogynistic undertones. Players unhappy and critical of a female lead with a very abundant personality, one who isn't conventionally attractive, leading to a more critical look from basement-dwelling neckbeards who want to jerk off to Monster Hunter characters. I'm looking at you, every weird dude thirsting after the Shrine Maidens in Monster Hunter Rise. That's one of the big reasons why you see people so happy to temporarily have the serious Handler join them, one who often gets compared to the Handler as more attractive overall and with a better personality, even though her personality is really a lack of one in my opinion. I even believe we can tie all of the loose topics together and funnel them back into the conclusion under the umbrella of misogynistic perception. Consider the recklessness argument, something that is praised and often applauded in male heroes whether they can defend themselves or not. Think Wolverine or any shonen protagonist before they become literally God. Consider that helplessness and uselessness are common talking points about women in general, buying into the traditionalist bullshit of men are protectors and women must be protected. People even upset that the woman character is getting praise for things mirrors real life work attitudes where women work twice as hard for half the praise in office situations. Or think about how women are always expected to act and exist within very specific boxes within our society, and deviations from those are met with hostility, in effect tying back in directly to my comparisons of the Guildmarm versus the Handler. Even her mechanical design complaints boil down to she's annoying, which is a pretty common trope for women to be considered for not being silent in society. Please remember that this isn't a call-out video in any way, but rather a look at what motivates people to feel a specific way about this character in the series, when I feel like we haven't seen this level of backlash before within the series for any other character, except maybe Nibiru. Just because this concluded in a lot of complaints potentially being fueled by an undertone of misogyny doesn't mean I'm saying you're some woman hater. It's just a factor of society and our culture that affects all of us in some way, and being able to shed some light on it and examine it is a healthy way of helping us realize how much this type of stuff affects us all. It's honestly interesting, and I'd love to see your takes on the subject in the comments, though I highly doubt I'll be responding to any of them on this specific video. Thank you all for watching, I'm Super Rad, and I'll see you in the next video.